Hey there, G.I. Sanders from NTX Vinyl, coming at you with another quick video. You guessed it, I'm going to talk about records as I usually do. This is a video I've been thinking about for a while. It's a topic that comes up very often within the vinyl community, with my customers, with my friends, with collectors that I speak with, and that is Discogs. So there is a plethora of good information out there on Discogs if you're looking to learn how to use it. Discogs themselves have an extensive knowledge base and active forum where you can dive into and read ad nauseum if you want to learn how to use the tool. I'm going to try and condense that down, and most importantly, the goal for me here is I wanted to present a video that you could watch and that would help you become a better record collector using Discogs. So not just how to use the tool, not just how to, navigate around the website or navigate around the app. Obviously, we're going to go around a little bit of that, but most importantly is like when you're using the app, when you're using the tool, how does it benefit you? So the main things I want to cover in this video are how you can use Discogs to become more educated, because I think that's critical. How you can use it to track and potentially find and buy more rare albums. How you can save money. How you can find those albums at the best price possible. That's very important. And most importantly, when you do amass a collection of any amount of size, even a couple hundred records, like how do you ensure that? Discogs is really important for that. So those are kind of the key benefits that I'm going to talk through as we go through the app. I'm going to screen share the app so you'll be able to see what I'm doing. But let's back up a little bit. So Discogs, what is it? It's short for discography. It is a standalone app on your iPhone, I'm assuming Android. It'll also work on tablet and also the website. And it allows you to dive in as deep as you want to go and learn as much as you want to learn about the hobby of collecting and about records themselves. It's an online crowdsourced database. So keep in mind, all of the data in Discogs is input by people just like me and just like you. So when there's a new album out, some person out there, maybe it's someone at the record label or with the band or someone who just received it as a fan, and they submit that information on that album, and then people can update it, can correct it. Think about it kind of the same way Wikipedia works, right? It's all crowdsourced information, so there's no necessarily definitive right or wrong answer, but the majority usually wins out in regards to presenting the information in a correct manner, because someone will correct it if it's not, right? And it's great. It's great for discovering new music for artists, albums that you didn't know existed. You can stumble across that. You can definitely learn a ton in regards to the different pressings of albums, the different variants of albums. Condition is huge. As you're looking through Discogs, you start to learn the value and how it fluctuates based on condition and how it fluctuates based on kind of supply and demand. So there's a lot of things that inherently you will get better at just by using Discogs. And I think most importantly, like I touched on in that first benefit, is it's all about education. So the more time you spend with your records, the more time you spend using Discogs, it's going to benefit you across the board from an education standpoint, because you're going to learn a lot. Now, that being said, Discogs is not the be-all, end-all. Like, there are plenty of people who use it passively, maybe use it along with other tools where you can look to see what albums are being bought or sold for to establish value. But it's certainly the most widely accepted, I would say, at this point for sure. Like, going back a couple years ago, it wasn't near as widespread as far as usage. But now pretty much anyone who is serious about collecting and who starts to dive even a couple layers deep into their collection and wanting to learn more, Discogs has become the go-to resource, like it or not. So I want to touch on those benefits along the way, but we will dive in. First off, I think most importantly is how to look up an album. Now, this is one of the key elements to Discogs, and if you don't know how to actually determine what you have, well, then obviously you're going to be at a disadvantage. So first and foremost is how to research an album. So I've got a couple albums here we're going to go through. I'm going to share my screen. That will allow you to actually see what I'm doing very easily. And we're going to dive in and actually start looking up some albums. So first and foremost is, what do you look up? Couple things. So obviously you've got the artist name, you've got the album title. You can start there. You can search by Jimi Hendrix, obviously, and then you can filter down by there. That's going to be a lot slower. You can go off the album name itself. So instead of doing Jimi Hendrix, do Are You Experienced? And you can also go off the catalog number, which if you go on the spine of just about any record that you look up, you're going to have a catalog number that is associated with that album. This one happens to be RS 6261. So let's put that in. I will say most of the time, if you've got an album that's open and it's not sealed, you want to go off what's on the actual disc label, which is obviously here on the record, right? Because the jackets sometimes are used across multiple pressings. So what happens is a record label will press up, let's say 5,000 of a certain album. They may press a couple extra thousand of the cardboard jackets, knowing that if it sells out, they'll do another pressing, but they'll reuse those jackets, so they don't have to set up the printing presses to the jackets again. So that's why it's important to always key off the disc label itself versus the jacket when you can. Sometimes the jackets can give you clues and identifiers, but most importantly, I think, is to go off the disc label. So, like I mentioned, we're going to go to RS 6261 and see where that takes us. I'm just going to start there because that's the bare bones that you need to know to get an album, to get started, right? So as soon as I put in RS 6261, immediately you're going to see a bunch of different albums come up. Some of them are versions of Are You Experienced? Some of them are different albums because there are absolutely catalog numbers that match and variants that match with the same catalog number. But right off the bat, you can see this first one here. I'm just going to click into that one, and that's going to take us to a very specific pressing of Are You Experienced, right? So this happens to be a 1967 pressing. Whether or not it's this exact one, we'll see. But the other route is just to search the album name. So if I go Are You Experienced, let's see here, and I find the actual, all right, here we go. So if I search by Are You Experienced, and now I've got releases up top. So this is a key screen. So this releases up top that I'm scrolling through here that scrolls horizontally. Those are the actual core release pages. Then if you scroll down here, you've got release versions. So you've got two options. You can start up at the main release, or you can go down and take a guess and see if maybe one of the versions that came up is correct. I'm going to start with the main release because that's kind of the core. So you can see from here, this is the Jimi Hendrix Experience, Are You Experienced, first release in 1967. And you've got the See All Versions button. Now, this is every version of this album, not just vinyl. This is cassette, 8-track, CD, DVD, etc., etc. It doesn't matter what format. So you're starting at the very highest level when you go to the release page. So if I click See All Versions here, you'll see what I'm talking about. I can scroll for days in regards to the different formats, all the different pressings. You've got cassettes, like I mentioned, you've got stereo versus mono. It's very overwhelming. If you're just going to search for Are You Experienced and think you're going to find it, it's going to really beat you down. So filtering and sorting is very, very key. So once I come to this See All Versions, so again, I'm on the main release page, I go to See All Versions. This little menu up here on the right is very important because this allows you to filter. So right off the bat, if I filter by format, you can see that there are 345 different versions of this album. But if I drill down just to vinyl or LP, which are pretty much interchangeable, I've got 196. Okay, that's a little better, but still completely overwhelming. If I know this is a stereo versus a mono, which I can see just by looking at the label a lot of times, you can see it's got stereo right down there at the bottom of the label. I can also filter by stereo, so now that's got me down to 94 versions. All right, not bad. Still pretty daunting though. But the key is I can also continue my my filtering. So the next thing I would do, or the things I always do, format, filter by format, and then filter by country. So if I come down to US, now I've got 48 to deal with. Now again, this is an extremely popular album, Hendrix's first record, so you can imagine there's a lot of different versions of this. Some albums don't have near this many, some have more. But 48 different versions in the US. Now from here, what you're doing is trying to determine what this label looks like versus which are these. And I've got this in my collection already. So I can tell you by the fact that has this one here in the middle has my collection, the little collection icon on it is the one. But you can go through here and start swiping through. And the main thing to do is to look at the actual label itself. So you're looking at the way the fonts are laid out, you're looking at the way the text is laid out, and looking for any identifiers that differentiate what's on this disc label versus what's on this picture. So it takes a little bit of trial and error when there are, again, 48 different pressings just in the US on vinyl. But if I come down here to this stereo pressing, I can see, and again, I'll put a close-up of this, but this label right here is exactly what I'm looking at on the screen, and that's what allows me to identify which pressing it is. So once I have the pressing identified, then I can get to work, because then I can start to understand, okay, how valuable is this? I can add it to my collection. I can establish value if I'm looking to purchase another copy, or maybe I'm looking this up to buy my first copy. There's a lot of different things you can do from here, but the first thing is just understanding how to find which album you have. All right. So from there, researching the value, I think, is something that everyone uses Discogs for, or at least should be. And there's really three basic options. You've got the ability to look at the sales history, which is right here in the middle, and you can see on the very low end, this album sold for $7 at some point in time. The median value is around 35, and the high value is around 215. So keep in mind, these are actual prices of albums of this album that have sold on the Discogs marketplace. So we'll talk about what that means. But this isn't albums that have sold in record stores, unless the store is selling them on Discogs, obviously, or on eBay or anywhere else. This is only through the Discogs marketplace. But the Discogs marketplace is extremely popular. In fact, just in the last couple years, I believe they have passed even eBay as far as number of LPs sold as far as an online site is concerned. So again, the vast majority of people who are buying records online are buying them from Discogs, or at least more than anywhere else. So that's what the sales history means. It doesn't mean this is albums sold everywhere and this is taking an aggregate. These are actual sold prices that have sold on Discogs. So that sales history is very important. There are two other places. So you can also click on the last sold, and that will tell you in detail view. So you can actually look through here and say, on April 10th, 2021, a copy of this sold for $40. And you can see the condition, you can see the comments, and you can scroll down the line and see actual sold prices of this album. So again, supply and demand. This is what this album is selling for right now based on the condition. So that's very important to look at. The other thing you can do is actually look at what is for sale right now. Very important. So if you're trying to establish what a record is valued at, or maybe you want to sell that record, well, let's see what else is out there. So if I go for sale, now again, this can get very daunting because you've got 18 copies for sale. Well, there's not another copy that looks exactly like this one, but you want to find as close as possible. So again, it comes down to filtering and sorting. So I'm going to use this menu up here, and I'm going to sort by just the copies, first of all, that are in the US, because a lot of people don't do international shipping, or there's a lot more risk, I would say, and expense if you're going to order from overseas. So I'm going to sort by shipped from United States, and that's going to automatically filter out all the international albums that are available, and it also puts it in order by price. So if I scroll down to the very bottom, I can see that this $8 copy, the grade on it, the media, which is the vinyl itself, is a fair, which means probably not very good. And the sleeve is generic, so it doesn't even have a sleeve, and that's why it's $8. And then I can scroll up from here. You've got copies that are fair, more generics. Now I'm getting up to a $25 copy that's a VG media and a G sleeve, which is very good and on the vinyl and good on the sleeve, which again is not a great copy. So if I keep scrolling up, I can get up to here, okay, we've got a VG and a fair. So there's not a lot available in the US. There's no VG plus, which is really what you're looking for from a quality perspective and a condition perspective. So that's how you can determine what your particular copy is worth. Approximately is looking at a similar graded record and looking at what's available in the United States, as well as the history of what's sold. So there's a couple different things to look at into value. It's not as easy as just finding the album and saying, oh, it's worth this amount. It's not that simple, nor is it with any collectible, especially when it comes down to condition and rarity and those things. The other thing to look at, which I think is important to establish rarity, is these little icons up here. You'll see the little eye icon, which has 5,000. That means 5,000 people have this album in their want list. That means 5,000 people want this album, or at least they've marked it in their want list. And I'm going to go into the want list in a little bit. And then you'll see 13.9, so almost 14,000 people already have it in their collection. So that ratio is very important. This is obviously a very established and popular record, but if it's more, let's say it's a little more less common record, and that is more lopsided towards people who want it versus have it, well, that tells you something about rarity, because obviously if only handfuls of people actually own the album and a lot more people want it, well, there's going to be more demand for that. So just a little identifier that'll help you kind of understand what you have in your collection. So that is an overview of what it looks like when you dive in to try and find a record and when you're trying to establish value. So again, don't just key off of one of those things. Look at the sales history. Look at the what's actually sold recently, because prices fluctuate. If you look at the sales history and something sold, in the last one that sold was a year ago, well, that's probably not current market value, because the vinyl industry fluctuates just like any other market does out there. And then obviously look at what's actually for sale and look at how many people have it in their want list. And that'll give you at least an idea of how to zero in on value of a record. And again, I think that is a very important piece from an education standpoint, because if you want to collect more, you want to learn more about the hobby, it's all about understanding what you have in your collection or what you desire to have in your collection. So very important tools. All right, so let me stop that screen record to make sure that I have that one saved. Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about is how to log your collection. Well, everything we just did is the process of logging your collection. So you can imagine if you've got a stack of records or a couple hundred records or boxes of records, and you've got to get those logged into Discogs, or you want to get those logged into Discogs. You can imagine how long that would take, right? Based on that process that I just showed you. Now, maybe you're not going to look at in-depth into the value, but even just finding the record can be a little daunting, right? And so if the record was released after 1980, there's a pretty good chance that it'll have a barcode, and that'll help you out, and we'll show one of those examples. But anything pre-1980, you're not going to have a barcode, so you're going to want to put in that catalog number or the album title, and then filter down based on the format and the country, like I talked about. And then most importantly is, okay, let's log it in the collection. So let's go over here. I'm going to look up another album. This is Hymns by Johnny Cash. Let's look this one up, and then we can talk about adding it to the collection. So I'm going to go off of the catalog number, which in this case is CS8125. So if I go CS8125, and it's pretty specific in regards to spaces. I can't type here, 8125. Spaces, hyphens, any different characters in the catalog number, you're going to want to type it in as close as possible. So again, I put in CS8125, and there's a whole bunch of stuff coming up here, right? I don't even see the Johnny Cash album. So what I want to do, again, these are just suggestions. So I want to actually hit search, and this is going to give me the releases and the suggestions. So I can go through here. I'm still not seeing it. All right, maybe I'll go here and see if there's any versions. Okay, there's one. I see a 1959 stereo copy of Hymns by Johnny Cash. The first thing I do is just go straight to the label picture. Don't start scrolling around, because you want to find the label that matches, or at least is a very close match before you start diving in. So I'm going to scroll through and go, okay, there you go. So a completely different looking label, obviously still on Columbia, This is what is called a 2i Columbia pressing. They call those I's for whatever reason. You can see the one I looked up on Discogs is actually a 6i. So that's not the correct version. So what do I do from here? Well, all you have to do is scroll down a little bit and you'll see all versions. That's going to take you to that same place where I was when we looked up the Hendrix album. So now we've got that daunting list of every version of this album, again, regardless of format. So you've got to filter. So immediately filter by format, go to LP or vinyl. In this case, I can see again it's stereo, and since this is an older album that was issued on mono and stereo, it always helps to drill down. So I'm going to drill down. So now you can see I've only got 9 to choose from. But again, I didn't filter by country, so I'm going to filter by country as well. All right, now we're down to 7. All right, so I know this isn't a promo, or at least I don't think it is. So I'm going to skip that first one. That second one there is the one we just looked at, I believe. Then you've got one with an alternate cover. Okay, so here we go. Now we've got a repress on stereo. So maybe this is it. So again, the first thing I'm doing is looking at the photos. All right, so this looks pretty close. I'll try and put up a picture if this is not close enough, but this appears to be it. I can look at the way that the type is set. I can look at the fonts, and I can see that this is gonna match. I see a little something different here, actually. This says non-breakable underneath the catalog number. So if I go back here, let me try this second one. Maybe it'll have that identifier on it. Again, you're looking at the very specifics of the label. Let's see if Discogs wants to load here. No, that's a different one too. So I think that one may have been the closest match. Actually, here it is, Mimi. All right, there we go. So I found it. If you look under the CS8 8125, it's got the word unbreakable, and that's, or non-breakable, and that's it. Okay, so how do I add this to my collection? It's very simple. There's 2 icons. We talked about them already. The eye icon means you're watching it, and the little, it looks like, records stacked up against each other. So all I do is hit add to collection. If I want to add notes, I could add notes about the condition or where I got it from or anything specific to my specific version. Again, this is going to be logged to your version. I can hit save, and automatically you'll see now that that button is highlighted green. That means I've added it to my collection, right? So that's very important. At the same time, let's say, okay, so I've got that one in my collection, but I actually want this one way up here, not the promo version, but this version that we initially looked like, that 6i version. Let's say I want to keep tabs on that one. I want to add that to my want list. Well, all you do is add that, click the little eye icon, and that's going to add it to your want list. So now you'll get email notifications if you want that track your want list, and you can go to the want list button, which we'll show here in a minute. That actually you can scroll through and see everything in your want list to keep tabs of what you're looking for. So that's very important. All right. So once you've logged your collection, we'll go back to the want list in a little bit. Once you started to log your collection, you can see a roundup of that in 2 places. So you can go to collection at the bottom, and actually if you go to filter, artist, filter, added, and there you go. There's the Johnny Cash right at the top. So that's the most recent item that I've added to my collection. So you can scroll through here, you can search your collection. So if I go, Led Zeppelin, everything that I've got is going to come up, again, regardless of format. So you can scroll through. So it's a very good way to see what's in your collection without walking up and actually looking through it. And we'll talk about the value in that. You can also go, that's the collection tab. You can also go to My Discogs, and that will give you an overview and an estimated value of your collection. Now, everything I'm showing you is on the app. You can go to discogs.com in a web browser on a computer and see all of this. I personally think the app is way more user-friendly. It's way faster and less cumbersome. So I would recommend using the mobile app, whether it's on, again, iPhone, Android. I'm using it on a tablet. They actually don't have a dedicated iPad app, but the view that you're looking at is just the iPhone app, just expanded large, which actually works quite well on an iPad. So, all right, so that's logging your collection. I think the biggest thing for logging your collection was 2 things. One, you need to know what's in your collection. Otherwise, how do you know what to add to your collection? So that's very important. And I think the want list comes in here, which we're going to get to. So that's number 1 about actually logging your collection. Number 2 is if you ever want to insure your collection, you've got to have it logged somewhere. If you want to do it in a spreadsheet, that's awesome. You want to write it down on paper, great. We'll take forever. This is the best way, in my opinion, because you can go through, and again, it's crowdsourced, so it's going to have all the different options in most cases, and you're going to have the ability then to actually find the album you have, quickly push a button, add it to your collection, and keep tabs on that, so that at any point in time, if you do want to go get collector's insurance because your collection is very valuable, you have a database that you can download, that you can prove that you have these in your collection, along with photos and other documentation, of course. But so it works as a very, very a great way to log your collection for insurance purposes. So that's very important. All right, so we touched on the want list a little bit. So that's about how to log your collection. I guess before I go to want list, I will say this, and I'll mention this. Well, I'll leave that for the pro tips at the end, actually. So, all right, so the want list. This is, in my opinion, if you're going to use Discogs for anything. Let's say you're like, I don't have time to log my collection. That's going to take me too long. I get it. Believe me, it takes a while. But at least use it for the want list. And it's very important because you can come into your want list, pretend you're in a record store, and you're searching through, or you walk into a record store and it's overwhelming. It's a big store. They've got tons of great inventory. You don't have time to look through every record in that store. But if you have a dedicated want list somewhere, maybe you've got it in a note on your phone, maybe you've just got it in your head. I've got mine in Discogs. So when I walk into a record store, or when I'm shopping online, or when I'm talking with people about albums that I'm going after, I can refer to my want list at any time. So it's very, very useful to use this tool, because you can go through Discogs and find albums that you didn't know it existed, or you do know it existed and you want that album. You can check, you can click the button, add it to your want list. So I think it's incredibly valuable and useful, so you're not overwhelmed, because there's a lot of records and you need to drill in on what you're looking for at this current time. Or maybe it's something you're like, man, I don't know if I'll ever be able to afford this, but at least I want to put it on my list for a rainy day. And then who knows, maybe a copy will come available, and I'll show you how to keep track on that. To keep track of that to where you could get it at a great price, right? So the other thing is, you'll avoid, if you do have your collection logged and you do utilize the want list properly, you'll avoid buying duplicates. So a lot of times when your collection grows over probably just a couple hundred albums, it's very hard to remember every album you have, especially which version you have. So if you're in a record store and you see an album, you're like, man, I love this record. I think I have it. Maybe I don't have this version. Well, that's where Discogs come in. You can pull out your phone and you can check to see if you have that specific one, or maybe the one you have isn't in great condition, or it's a reissue and you want an original. So again, these are all things that are very useful, and again, that are going to educate you as you're collecting, as you're buying, as you're trading, as you're selling, whatever it is you may do. Having the information about your collection on hand at all times is very, very important. Talked about searching for ideas. That's one of the best things. I can't stress it enough, is using it when you're in the record store. So again, just kind of browsing what you're looking for, or even asking, the record store. You can kind of look and go, oh yeah, I'm looking for this, and you can go ask them and say, hey, I'm looking for this copy. I'm looking for a copy of Hymns by Johnny Cash. Do you guys have that? Well, you never would have remembered that unless you didn't have that on your want list, especially if your want list is really long, like most people's are, because there's a ton of great records that everyone wants out there. So now the notifications are key. There is, you can go and set your notifications in Discogs, and you can receive an email once a day that will send you all of the newest stuff that has landed on your want list. So if I go to my want list, I can scroll through here and actually find albums. So let's say we've got this Alice in Chains album on my want list. I want to come in here, and there's only 2 copies available. One of them's, in the United States, so that's great. So I may want to pick that up. These are the types of things that when you get that daily want list, you can actually eyeball it in your email, click through on it, takes you to the app, and you can actually, research the album there and maybe purchase the album if it's a good price, if it's something you're looking for. So the want list is very, very key. All right, so the next thing is actually buying on Discogs, which we're talking about right here. So the Discogs marketplace, again, just like all the information being crowdsourced, all of the albums for sale are from people all over the world. Some of them are very experienced. Some of them own record stores, and some of them aren't experienced and don't own record stores. So you've got to be careful. You got to know who you're buying from, and I think that's probably the biggest deterrent from buying on Discogs is people just don't know where this stuff's coming from, because anybody can own a record and create an account and put it up for sale. And how do you trust them, right? It's a great app. They've got some things in place, just like any other online buying resources, that will enable you to do a little research, to make some educated guesses on who you want to buy from, where they are. I talked about, buying, within the United States versus internationally if you're in the United States. The other things you can do is there's actually reviews and ratings on the buyer. So there's reviews on the albums and ratings on the buyer. So if I click into that, let's see. All right, so if I go, there's only one note on this. So if I go into this live facelift album and I click on the little icon, there you go. There's a couple of reviews, or at least one, and a couple replies. Let's see if I can go to one more. So here's MTV Unplugged. All right, so you got 3 reviews on this one, the little blue icon in the middle. So this is what gives you an idea, especially when you get into certain pressings, if you want to check out how that album sounds. So you see this one, there's no reviews at all. Let me go through, see a larger one, no reviews on that one. So it's just hit or miss if there's reviews. But that's something that I always try and look at, especially as you get into, again, different variants or older pressings. So that's really resourceful. And then the other thing, which we'll get into, is the ratings on an actual buyer. So if I want to come in here and buy this album, so I'm going to buy, this is a 2006 version of Pet Sounds. The first thing I'm going to do, again, is I'm going to sort this or filter this by ships from United States, because that's important. And here we go. So now I've got copies available in the United States. The cheapest copy down here is $70. It's a near mint copy on the media, which is the vinyl, and a VG Plus on the jacket and or sleeve. So now I can click here and go, all right, do they have any notes on this? All right, so they've got comments. The jacket is VG Plus with small corner creases, and they've got the actual number because it's a numbered edition. So that's great. You know they've got this in hand. The other thing is look at the seller's ratings in their other inventory. So they've got over 1,000 ratings, meaning that 1,000 people have rated them, 1,000 buyers have rated them as a seller, and 99.9% of them are giving them, 4.5 stars. So that's you've got to think that this seller's doing something right. You've got to go with the majority. So that's going to give me confidence to purchase this record from this specific buyer. The other thing I do, which is a good tip, is always look at their other inventory. So you can view seller's inventory and see if there's anything else that they have that you may want, especially since you're going to have this shipped to you. They can combine shipping. So if you're going to pay, $5-7 to have an album shipped, you might look and see if they have anything else. So it's going to be automatically sorted by the stuff that they've listed, the newly listed albums. I could also sort that by, let's say, highest price, and let's see what collectibles they have. So they've got stuff that I can scan. Most useful, I think, is filter by this on the left hand. Filter by all versus filter by in my want list. So again, if you keep your want list updated and current, it's very easy to come in here and go, okay, they didn't have anything else. All they have, the only thing that aligns in their inventory with my want list is this single copy of Pet Sounds. That just happens to be the case. But that's going to give you, the advantage and save a little money if you're looking to, buy a couple items at a time. You can find a seller that has more than one thing that's on your want list, right? So that's very key. The other thing you can do, aside from just purchasing an album, so again, let's go in, here's a Revolver limited edition mobile fidelity copy. If I go in here for sale, again, I'm going to filter by ships from United States. There's only one copy that's available. It's $220. So let's say, I don't want to pay $220. Well, if you notice, I think it was on that copy of Pet Sounds, there was a make an offer button. So similar to eBay, where there's a buy it now and there's an offer, and there's no auction, but there maybe is an offer. Discogs has the same functionality. Now, on this particular record, this seller doesn't have the option to make an offer, but you can always message them and see if they'll take less. That's a real thing. You can hit contact seller down here, and it'll actually pop up, and this will send, and it'll reply and notify you via email, and it'll be in your Discogs inbox, your messaging. So if you like to haggle, you can certainly do that on Discogs. But the other thing that's very important is to ask the sellers for photos. So if I'm going to pay $220 for this album and they don't have any comments, they don't have any mention of what the condition is, well, I want to actually see some photos of this. And so it's very common, especially on higher dollar albums, for buyers to contact the sellers, say, hey, send me some photos. In fact, whenever I sell anything on Discogs, I actually put in the comments, feel free to message for photos. If it's a new album and sealed, not necessarily, because that's a little overkill, but anything that's a vintage used album where condition is very important, that's something that I'm always open to, especially if it's an album that's over, $50 in value, where people, are concerned about spending that much and having something shipped and all that type of thing. So that's very important. Reviewing the seller is great too. So obviously if you get something, it's packaged well, the item is as described, you're very happy, you can go back and leave a review, because that's how those ratings work. So that's very important. So that's, a very high level overview of Discogs. The other thing I think to keep in mind is when logging your collection. So this is kind of my pro tips at the end. There's a lot of things, a lot of different things I could go through in here, but I'm trying to keep this succinct, especially if you're just starting out. And if I was to pinpoint a few tips, well, when you're logging your collection, tip number one, just take your time. Like, don't bite off more than you can chew. Don't think, you know what, I'm going to log, let's say you got 500 records. I'm going to log them all this month. You'll kill yourself. You will burn out so fast. So take your time, do a few a day, do a few a week, just pick it off. Like when I logged my collection, which at the time when I initially got the bulk of it in, it was probably around 1,000 records, and I think I probably took six to 8 months to do it. It just takes that long. Now, if you've got a lot newer albums that have barcodes, which I didn't even show, but if you see, if you've got a barcode on an album, so let's see if I come back down here, let me start recording again. All right, so if you've got an album with a barcode, it's very simple. Just use the search functionality, click on the little barcode tool, and you can scan that album, and then that's going to pull up the different versions, and you can go through what we went through before. So you want to go through and actually match the label and make sure the one that you have it is. In this case, I'll check this Brothers in Arms. I'm pretty sure this is the right copy. Yep, it's the exact label. You can go through and read notes about this and make sure that it's the right one if you want to get really in detail as far as what's on the jacket, what's the specifics on the label. All those things are really important. And again, then I can add that to my collection, click save. So now I've logged one, right? One down, hundreds or thousands to go. But again, back to the tip, take your time when you're logging the albums, and just try not to be overwhelmed, and just do it a little bit at a time. And it's going to be invaluable. Most importantly, is once you get all of your albums in, again, maybe you've got 50 albums, maybe you got 500 or 5,000. Once you get them all in, then you've got to stay up on it. So as you buy new records, you have to make sure that you're logging them as you go. Otherwise, you'll fall behind. I typically will keep, maybe 20 or 30 or 40 albums that have come in recently, and then I will do it in a batch, to where I'll sit down over a weekend and I'll log that whole new batch and I'll shelf them. And then when new ones come in, it starts a new pile. So find a system that works for you. Maybe it's one at a time, maybe it's 10 at a time, maybe it's waiting until you get a whole crate full, then you log them, whatever it may be. But that's very important, is to stay up on it. I mentioned the pro tip of messaging the seller for photos. If you're buying on Discogs, I can't recommend that enough, especially if it's a used album, and especially, if it's a $5 album, probably not. That's going to annoy a seller. Obviously, you got to keep in mind they've got a lot of sellers have hundreds or thousands of available albums in their inventory on Discogs. So for them to take the time to email you photos of a $5 copy of something is a little much. But again, if it's, $40, $50 and up, especially anything, $100 or more, I would never buy it without asking for photos. Just like I wouldn't go on eBay or go in a store and buy something blindly without, for that much money without actually seeing it. So I don't think at least that's just my opinion. Other sellers may feel differently, but that's the way I work. Lastly, and if you've made it this long, you're going to get a good pro tip. I talked about the want list, and I talked about the notification email. So that's important, because each day you'll get that email and it's a little recap of your want list. But if you've got a big want list, maybe you've got, 30, 40, 50 albums, or maybe hundreds of albums on your want list. That can be overwhelming. You get an email each day. It's like, I don't have time to look through and find one that's a good deal. There's actually an app that you can use, and it is called Discogs. Check this out, or I should say it's a website, not an app. So this is a third-party tool. Discogs is the ability to get alerted when an album on your want list, or just an album in general, becomes available at a certain price or below. That's very important. So this is what it looks like, and it's very simple. So let me show you. So all you do is, when you're on Discogs, so let's go back to my want list, and I will grab something. Here we go, Rubber Soul, Mobile Fidelity. So let's say I come here, there's 8 of these available. Again, I'm gonna sort it by US only. All right, so there's 3 available in the United States. It looks like $95, $100 range is probably the best I'm gonna get. Here's a VG Plus, VG Plus. You know what? That's not a bad price, but I don't wanna really spend more than about $75. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm going to use these 3 little dots up at the very top right, which is called the hamburger menu. I'm going to click share. Then I'm gonna copy that. Now what I did is I just copied the direct link to this specific version of Rubber Soul. So now if I come back over to Discogs and I put in my username, which is NTX Vinyl, and then I come down here, well, let's see, first I put on my username and hit return. Okay, so now it's loading. All right, so this actually pulled in my want list. So I could actually go down this want list, not a very user-friendly way, and click into these and add alerts for them, but I think I'm just gonna do the paste. So it says paste the Discogs URL. I'm gonna paste that. I'm gonna hit return, and automatically there it is. So this is it. Now I can put in a max price and say, you know what, I don't wanna pay more than $75 for this. It's gonna make me create an account because I'm not logged in, but you can put in your max price. And you can actually put in your condition value, and you can put in number of days that you want this to last. And then what will happen is you'll actually get a text. So the Discogs service texts you the minute a seller lists this album for $75 or less. It's going to text me along with anyone else who has that alert set for this specific album. And I can click and buy right there because it'll go fast if it's a good deal. So I've actually gotten a lot of records on the rarer side and expensive side at great prices because I've used Discogs to alert me. So this is a service that's pretty new. It's a freemium service that just an awesome person made, who's obviously a developer. So I highly recommend using Discogs if you're not. It's a really cool hack, and if you've made it this far into the video, hopefully you'll at least take away that. So hit me with any questions. There's a ton more that you can unpack in regards to Discogs and the value it brings. But I think, again, going back to the very start, the real key is just to educate yourself. The more time you spend with your collection, I'll say it again, the more time you spend with a tool like Discogs, it's going to give you more information about what you own, about what you want to own, and about the actual value. So when you walk into a record store, or when you go to an online shop, or when you're shopping on the Discogs marketplace, you're more informed, you're gonna make smarter decisions, you're gonna save money, you're gonna get the albums you want in your collection faster than you would if you were uneducated. So that's my how to use Discogs to become a better record collector video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this provided some value. If you have, like I mentioned, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. Feel free to comment, and hopefully I'll do some future videos on Discogs going into more specific sections. But I wanted to do one main one that really focused on the benefits. So I hope this helped you guys out. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.